articulate and justify positions. It reminds me of it reminds me of when you are kind of debate class and what you may have learned in debate class, you know, justifying your position within your debate. So here's our first question. I want you to brainstorm an alternative approach or perspective to think critically in your personal life. So let's brainstorm. Again, today will be very interactive, so get ready to jump in. So we're going to brainstorm on an alternative approach or perspective to think critically in your personal life. So think of an event that may have taken place with you recently personally. And let's kind of, based on our critical thinking definition, let's really think about, did we approach that particular situation thinking about it critically? I'll share first. So for example, my family and I, we sometimes put on gatherings, and one of the problems that we always have with the gatherings is who's going to do what part of the work. It's always a big to do. So what I decided to do is, instead of just allowing people to say, oh, I'm going to do this part of it or that part of it, I said, no, we have to come up with a better way of process for this. So what I decided to do is actually list out the things that were needed. And I encouraged everyone to actually go after their strength. What is your strength? Don't go after something that you are just trying to do. Or, for example, I always use this little statement: that's not my ministry. So when someone asks me to do something that's outside of what I consider is a specialty or a strength of mine, I tell them that that's not my ministry, which basically says, this is not my strength, but let's see whose strength it is. So because that was a different approach, everyone was able to actually come to the table. They were much more happy with what they were assigned with. And going forward, this is actually how we're going to continue on, because it made less arguments. It was a much smoother process, and pretty much everyone was happy. So we felt like that was a win-win. And I utilized the brainstorming approach with that when I came up with that process. So does anyone want to share a personal situation, and it doesn't have to be anything heavy, just something that you've gone through recently that you could have maybe used some critical thinking with to create a different approach and perspective to that particular scenario. I'll start calling you.
I could start if you like.
Okay, go on, Joanna.
Yeah, because it's kind of reminded me of something about a year or a couple of years ago. I was part of a group, an uprising group in Lebanon. So we were thinking about how we were going to affect political and social change. And the problem is that how do we organize ourselves, because we're new, we're rebelling, and we need to create a new system to replace the old one. How will we do that? So it was so the process was to create systems. How do we choose our representatives in parliament? So how do we create elections? What are the standards that we need to have for our elect representatives? And what are also an important issue is what are the most priority issues that we want to achieve. For example, how do we fight corruption? The judicial system as well is not independent. So how do we achieve that? And I mean, it's a lot of, it's so many different challenges. And how do you want to structure that in order to achieve change or to really make a difference? So this is my experience in critical thinking. So how do you change a system using critical thinking?
Thank you so much for sharing. So brainstorming would definitely be beneficial in trying to decide exactly how to go about changing those systems that you're referencing. So let's go on to the next. Why is critical thinking important? Number one, critical thinking fosters intellectual independence and curiosity. Number two, it enhances problem-solving abilities and decision-making skills, which is what Joanna was just referencing. Number three, it protects you against being vulnerable to manipulation, propaganda, the influence of others, and poor decisions. Number four, it facilitates the 3 C's, which are communication, collaboration, and creativity in the workplace. And number five, employers value critical thinkers for their ability to innovate and adapt to change. So let's go to our next question. Explain why you think critical thinking is important. Who's going to share with us?
I'll jump in. For me, it's critical thinking is important because it allows us to not repeat history. It allows us to take things that we've already learned in the past and think about that in a new way and potentially warp that to really understand what our future potentials really look like.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much for sharing. That was great. I like the way you summarized it. So let's go on. Let's see. New mindset, new results. The old adage. What's the definition of crazy? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, right? So we're going to do some mindset shifting so that we can get new results. So I want to talk to you today just to dive a little deeper into critical thinker. Let's talk about the characteristics of a critical thinker. And while I'm going through this particular segment, I want you to think about yourself and think about what you possess already and the things that you may need to either enhance or completely pick up and kind of dive into and grow in that particular area. So one of the characteristics of a critical thinker is open-mindedness. That means you have a willingness to consider different perspectives and explore new ideas. Another characteristic is skepticism, questioning assumptions and seeking evidence before drawing a conclusion. Let me repeat that. Questioning assumptions and seeking evidence before drawing a conclusion. So that means that you are completely open to reviewing all of the evidence, and you'll wait until the end before you will actually draw your conclusion. This also kind of pushes you into the realm in the workplace, just to kind of give you some additional information. So often employees are really concerned about questioning employers or questioning the current rules and regulations of what's going on in the workplace. Well, in order to really thrive within a job and to always kind of push past where you currently are and grow, which will ultimately help the company to grow as well, you have to be willing to also challenge the current status quo. And that could mean maybe a current rule, or that could mean if an employer has a certain perspective, you're the one that stands up and says, you know, that's a really good perspective, but can I share this idea with you? You know, it's a scary space to be in the beginning, but once you become more and more comfortable with pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, you'll see how that will grow your critical thinking. And then it will also help you stand out in your job as being someone who has new and fresh ideas. Another characteristic is analytical skills, the ability to break down complex issues into manageable components. There's so often when things occur and we become overwhelmed because we look at the picture in its totality. I love the old saying of how do you eat an elephant? One piece at a time. And I always think about that whenever I come across a situation where I need to learn how to compartmentalize, or it's very important that I compartmentalize so that I can then devise a strategy to come up with a solution. So keep that in mind. What does it take to eat an elephant? You can only eat an elephant one piece at a time. This will help you with your analytical skills by reminding you to break down the complex issues. Don't take them as a whole. Another characteristic is creativity, generating innovative solutions and thinking outside the box. This is like, oh, this makes my heart skip. And the reason being is because when you are an entrepreneur at your core, one of the things that even if you're not born with this ability, one of the things that you have to push yourself to do is to think outside the box. This is how you come up with new ideas. This is how you push forward in the world of innovation, right? And if you are career bound, this is like, I always think of it as a gold nugget. If you're an employee who can think outside the box, you are light years ahead of your counterparts. So one of the things that I actually have on my bathroom mirror is I have a box, an actual box on my bathroom mirror. And it's a reminder for me to do something every day where I am thinking outside the box. So that's just a little nugget I just threw you. Did you catch it? So you guys can actually do this as well. I'm a sticky girl. I put stickies like all over my mirrors and walls. So that's one of the stickies that I do have on my bathroom mirror. It's a box, and it's a reminder to remind me I need to think of a day where I'm pushing and thinking outside the box. Growth cannot happen in the box. There's only so much space. So growth has to truly happen outside of the box. And another characteristic is healthy introspection, the ability to regularly become aware of one's decision-making, reactions, inner feelings, thoughts, and biases. So basically, this is what I call learning how you tick. And we all have our different ways of approaching things. We all have our different ways of reacting to things. If you constantly and consistently go in and say, you know what, let me reevaluate my reaction. Let me reevaluate my inner feelings about what just happened. Or let me reevaluate my inner feelings about this particular scenario, my thoughts and my biases. Am I bringing my past experiences to the table, which are now altering me looking at this objectively? Those are the types of questions that you want to ask yourself, and reevaluating who you are as an individual will always put you in a space of being someone who is constantly growing for the better. Question number 3, identify which characteristic of a critical thinker resonates with you the most and why. who's going to share? So out of the characteristics that we just went over, and I can back up if you need me to, let me know which one resonates with you the most and why. Who's going to share?
Hi, this is Krishandia. And I just like the fact that we just explored expanding our mindset from our current mindset and being pushed outside of that nucleus and exploring other avenues where we can massage and explore new creative ways of doing things, which should stir and continue to spark further innovation. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Can I share?
Sure.
I have a specific person that I find super admirable as a critical thinker. And what is most interesting about that person is the amount of research that he does, his knowledge, the fact that he researches a subject prior to commenting or to make a decision or a perception. And there are facts, there are bases, strong facts on which he bases his statements. So it's really being well informed, making well informed decisions or statements.
Yes, definitely. Evaluating everything before you make your decision. I think that's that's a gold nugget as well. Thank you so much for sharing. Let's talk strategy. Who's ready for a little strategy session here? Let's talk strategy. How can we become critical thinkers, or what's the strategy behind us really thriving within our own critical thinking? I'm going to give you a 5-step strategy. Get ready. Here we go. 5-step strategy to develop critical thinking. First, ask yourself, what's the problem? What's the problem? So this is us dissecting and eating that elephant one piece at a time, right? So what's the problem? Clearly articulate the problem or issue at hand. Clearly articulate the problem or issue at hand. So what this would require is at this juncture, we haven't made any decisions. We don't have any predisposed thoughts about what we're getting ready to embark upon. We're just literally stating the problem and then articulating the problem, right? And then you're going to pause to think. When you do your pause, at that point, you're going to gather relevant information to help you generate ideas. You're going to gather relevant information to help you generate ideas. Now, it's important. I don't want you to misconstrue when I say generate ideas. I'm not talking about a conclusion. I'm just merely speaking on gathering the information and allowing your brain to just freely begin to get into motion of the what ifs, the what could be's, the what does this mean? Just basic questions that you're asking yourself as you're taking in that information. And then you're going to evaluate. You're going to assess the credibility and validity of the source and potential solution. Okay, so let's break that down. When we evaluate, we assess the credibility. Now, we all know, unfortunately, in the world that we live in today, there's a lot of information out there that has been kind of put together and isn't necessarily true. So this is the time for you to say, wait a minute, is what I'm reading right now, or the information that I've gathered, is this credible information? In your personal life, that could mean, let's say you're in a group of friends and one friend says something about another friend. Wait a minute, is this a credible person that I'm listening to? Is this information credible? Before I get to a point where I'm seeing someone in a different way, right? So we want to assess the credibility. When it comes to your employer or your current job or your future job, you want to, let's say you work in let's say you work for Google and they want you to take on a new project. Well, what is that new project? Where can I get the information? Is this information credible for me to take back to the team? You always want to make sure whatever information you take back to the team, that it's a credible source and that there's validity to the source. Have they done anything else in this field? Are they proven in this field, right? And then just again, in the brainstorming sector, let's think of potential solutions without actually coming to a definite solution. We're still kind of allowing our brains to still just process everything. And after you evaluate, then that's when you start to make a plan. Making your plan entails you developing a strategy or action plan based on your analysis. So this is when you really dive in to everything that you've gathered, whether it be articles, conversations you've had, instructors you may have spoken with. This is when you really dive into all the information. My visual that I'm getting right now is I'm just using this as a comparison to kind of give you a visual. I think about how every year before I get ready to do my vision board, how I cut out all of these different things from different magazines and I'll go online and I'll print out stuff and I just have all this stuff all over my floor. And I'm not making any decision about what's going to be placed on the floor, on my board yet. I'm just gathering all of the things that I like or things that I feel have moved me, right? And then once it's time, when I get about 2 weeks prior to the new year, that's when I start to really dive into what's going to actually be on the vision board. But that's after I have laid everything out. I'm looking at everything, I'm assessing everything and how it applies to my life, my growth, my goals, all of that. So that's kind of the visual I want to give you in your critical thinking strategy. Gather the information, first articulate what the problem is, then gather the information, lay out all of the information on the floor, pick out what's credible, what's not credible, what's valid, and then start to develop your plan of how you're going to analyze and then create an action plan to move forward past this, right? But before you come to your solid and final conclusion, I want you to take a look one more time. Take a look one more time and reflect on the outcomes and the lessons learned to refine your approach. So what that means is, let's say, for example, you come up with a strategy and an action plan and you say, oh my gosh, I have it. This is the strategy I'm going to use every single time I come to a problem. I'm going to use this same strategy. Well, every strategy doesn't work for every problem. So it's very important that once you do create a strategy for a particular problem, then you also reflect on that problem and reflect on that strategy and its outcomes, and then the lessons that you've learned from what came out of that particular strategy. This means that critical thinking and the development of your strategy for critical thinking is ever evolving, but it's okay. You want it to be ever evolving because as you grow, so will your strategies, so will your critical thinking. What are the 5-step strategies for critical thinking? Now, I'm not expecting you to be able to call them all off right now, but I just want you to kind of think about what we just went over, and can someone share with me the one that stood out most for them and that they are definitely going to implement into their current strategy? Can someone share? Anyone, just unmute yourself. Do I need to call a name? Nelson, how about you?
I'm not sure if Nelson can unmute. I can share though.
Okay, go ahead.
I think I also put it in the chat, but I love planning. One of my top strengths is analytical, and I think that I'm just very an analytical person. And so one thing that I really like to do is develop a plan and a process. I just feel so good and so prepared and organized when everything, like there's a step by step. But I actually think sometimes I can be like an over planner, and sometimes I can't just go with the flow a little bit.
Mhm.
So that can be a little bit of a challenge for me too.
And I'm so glad you said that, because sometimes what happens, especially if you lean more towards being an overthinker, you can get bogged down in the critical thinking planning. So what's really good and a good solution for that is to actually, whether it be a friend, a coworker, someone, just grab someone who you know is not an overthinker and say, hey, can I just bounce this off of you? This is what I'm thinking. This is the strategy that I'm thinking of using. What are your thoughts? And that way you can utilize and bounce off that person to help pull you through what I call the muck. You don't want to get stuck in the muck. You want to make sure that as you're creating your strategy and your plan, that strategy and plan is used to actually bring you to an end result, not keep you stuck in one space. So that might be a little trick that you can use, just bouncing it off of someone who you know is more of someone who just takes off with things. Say, hey, this person can definitely pull me through where I get stuck in my head. So that's just a little trick. That's a bonus for you guys. All right, now let's chat about the benefits. The benefits of being a critical thinker. And there are many. How can critical thinking benefit you personally and professionally? Number one, improved decision-making leads to better business outcomes. I definitely would agree with that. Number two, weigh pros and cons, assess information validity, and anticipate consequences. I'm telling you, the gift of foresight, which is what you end up developing when you are able to break down things through critical thinking. It's almost like you'll develop a new muscle of being able to see things before they happen, a new muscle of being able to deal with things when they happen. It getting kind of here. I don't even say just think of your critical thinking as, let me grow and strengthen my critical thinking muscle. And being able to anticipate consequences, that benefits you personally, right? And it definitely benefits you professionally. If an employer sees that you're able to see problems before they become problems, you are going to be one of the star employees that they actually go to say, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing. Do you foresee anything happening if we decide to go this way? Or can you just take a moment and maybe sit down and think of any cons that may arise? Number three, articulate ideas clearly, support arguments with evidence, and engage in meaningful dialogue. Wow, that one there. Being able to break down, dissect, validate, and then articulate your ideas clearly, whether it be personally. Have you ever had a conversation with someone in your personal life and you're like, oh my gosh, they just do not get it. And they're saying, because you're not making sense. And you're thinking, I am making all the sense I need to make in my own head, right? Well, articulating your ideas clearly will definitely benefit you in your personal life and then in your work life, your professional life, whether it be entrepreneurship. When you are trying to go for funding, you have to be clear and articulate your ideas in order for an investor to want to invest in your company or your business or your idea. Also, in the workplace, it's important to say, you know, I am someone who, when people come to me, I'm able to articulate what my idea is, and then we can have a true conversation on if this is the right way or right idea, or if this is the right path that we need to take as a company. So that's important as well. Along with you're able to support your arguments and the evidence that you're able to bring to the table because you're clear. Clarity is key. Let me say that again. Clarity is key. Number 4, critical thinkers are better equipped to adapt to changing market conditions. I think in the last, 3-4 years, we have definitely seen a lot of changes in the markets, in our lives, in our world, right? So critical thinkers are better equipped to adapt to changes. It's what I call the pivot. How great are you at pivoting when things come to you, things happen to you, when your job changes or shifts, or they need something different from you? How great are you at pivoting? So critical thinkers are really good at adapting. So this is another reason why it's so important to really strengthen that critical thinking muscle. Number 5, foster curiosity, open-mindedness, and adaptability for lifelong growth. That's what we just talked about. But I really like the foster curiosity part. Have you ever come across someone who they're going through life and it just seems like they're walking through life? They're not curious about what's around the corner. They're not happy about what's down the street. They're just there. So critical thinking actually makes you a more curious person about life, about your capabilities, your abilities, and where you're going to be. Where am I going to be in a week? Where am I going to be in a month? Where am I going to take this idea in 3 months? It makes you curious. It gives you excitement about life. Number 6, stand out as a strategic thinker, a problem solver, and effective communicator in any profession. Being a strategic thinker and a problem solver, again, that's that ability to break things down. That's that ability to devise a plan, strategy. That's the ability to not become overwhelmed when things arise, right? Being a problem solver, there are careers. People have made careers out of just solving problems. And that's what entrepreneurship, after all, is all about. Let me check the market. Where are there problems that need solving? Wow, that's another product. Oh my gosh, that's another business, right? I mean, that's a gold mine. That means you will never, ever be in a position where you cannot make money because you're constantly coming up with different ways to solve problems that others haven't solved. In addition, I call it the gap, finding the gap in any market. And you can find the gap in a market, whether you're an entrepreneur or you're a career-bound person. If you work for someone and you learn the job, like they say, I know this job like the back of my hand. Well, once you know the job like the back of your hand, you know what it's time for? It's time for you to really start analyzing the job and finding the gaps within the job so that now you become your employer's problem solver. That's called job security. Think about your current role or future career aspirations. Describe 2 ways in which critical thinking can benefit you professionally. Who's going to share with us? their future career aspirations and share with us 2 ways critical thinking could actually benefit you professionally. Sophia, are you still there? I hear someone trying to unmute. Is someone trying to unmute? Sophia?
I could check right now. July.
Okay, go ahead, share with us.
Okay. Well, our work actually it's in sustainable development. So we're working on developing a smart city, a sustainable city. So we need to think about what the city will need in 20, 50 years from now. So it's so important to research the technology, to question, and we need to look into different sources and do a lot of research. So critical thinking is very important because I mean, seeing in the future, it's not clear, and there are so many different possibilities, and we want to discern what could be the most reasonable possibilities. So, okay, this is a current role in career aspiration. 2 ways in which critical thinking can benefit. Yeah, it's making the most valuable designs on the long term that could benefit people on the long term. And also being open to always question and take into consideration what people need or the people that you are serving need to best serve them.
I 100% agree. Thank you so much, Joanna, for sharing that. We'll have to talk about that in our next mentoring session. When your mind is full of assumptions, conclusions, and beliefs, it has no penetration. It just repeats past impressions. So the moral of the story, and this is by Santav Guru, the moral of the story is don't assume, don't draw conclusions before you have checked the credibility and validity of the source or information. And then keep an open mind, think outside the box so that you're not just repeating past impressions. And our very last question. Evaluate the strengths you currently have in your professional life that have made you excel in critical thinking. Evaluate the strengths you currently have in your professional life that have made you excel in critical thinking. Who wants to share with us? Prashandria?
Well, my current skills, I think, are great, but I have gone through some refining. I believe I saw growth mindset in the comment section. With being a critical thinker, I think I saw along the presentation that we have to be willing to evolve, get new tools, play in the sandbox a little bit, and come up with some new ideas. So with the innovation is just constantly staying open. Like you said, looking for ways to solve current problems, ways to do things better, differently, more efficiently. And so with that is just, I think first, like you said, identifying the problem and then going after it strategically and with the methodology behind the resolution. So needless to say, my current skills are good, I'm sharpening my skills, and this presentation also helped me to just remain open. That will be my takeaway today, is just staying open and realizing that I'm evolving as a critical thinker.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. Does anyone else want to share?
Hello, I want to share
Okay.
my after getting this meeting, I learned some this kind of qualities or characters for a critical thinker, and they are all contribute to a person's growing mindset. But I'd little to add about my research about college students for 4 years, from their freshman year to their senior years, their critical thinking development trajectories. So maybe this kind of real learning experience, considering critical thinking is not very rosy picture, because the students they are maybe, especially in the Asian context, they are maybe indoctrinated during these before the college years. They like to get fixed or assumptions, conclusions by the teachers or by their other authority. And in a college environment, we encourage them to be open, to have this kind of doubt about things that should not be taken for granted. So students suffer from this kind of using a Reginald quote. They said the mind splitting experience. The more they think, the more painful they are. And so because I follow their learning trajectory, and during each year I will give them an interview, personal interview, to see how they feel this critical thinking benefit them. So maybe at the very beginning stage, they are very curious about this new concept. They think they will bring the assumed positive change. However, in the how to say, the daily practicing, because they want to train their critical thinking muscle, they have to think about some issues to the depths. So this kind of in-depth thinking process brings some kind of disorientation or kind of emotional trauma for them. So I kind of understand the critical thinking concept when they utilize in a real life context situations. They could bring some because the students are learned to think, and if they cannot monitor this critical thinking tool in a healthy way, sometimes they will mislead or even go to some. But generally, I think this skill needs to be how to say, provide for the students to give them the better chances to survive in a complex academic and a real world context. And maybe these kind of traumas and pains is part of their growing pains for their intellectual growth. So I think this is kind of my discovery about my research participants during their learning how to think critically in their 4-year program. So I just want to share with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. One thing that I in my experience in working with students, I have this saying. I always say, if you can't go through the front door, go through the back door. And so basically, whenever it's, let's just, young people typically lean towards, being a little self-absorbed, right? Don't tell anybody I said that. But what happens is that if you can attach and this is across the board, honestly, but if you can attach for anyone who you believe needs to stretch their critical thinking muscle, or they have a resistance towards stepping outside of their own biases, or just not, they assume immediately, or anything like that, it's always good to do what I call bring it home. If you start with home, meaning how it will benefit them personally, that tends to open the door where they can at that point see, okay, this would be beneficial for me. Or, oh, wow, I didn't realize how that would actually hinder me because I did jump to this conclusion, or because I wasn't willing to step outside of the box and have an open mind. But it's important to, again, bring it home. You have to bring it. How will this affect you personally? And that may be after having a conversation, even if it's in a group conversation and someone says something and you remember what that student said, and then you can say, okay, now I know exactly what I need to say to get you to understand why it's important to stretch your critical thinking muscle or grow your critical thinking muscle. So again, sometimes just going through the front door, there's a resistance. So sometimes you have to go through the back door. And that's what I've done throughout the years, whether I'm coaching, when I've worked with students. I've always thought of, for those who kind of gave me, okay, I'm hitting a wall here. I always took it back to why for them personally. Or here's another thing, for whatever you see in that student, you could, like, for example, I always say that when we work with students, if we're a mentor or anything like that, I can see the greatness in my students. I could see the greatness in my mentees before they can, right? So what I tend to do when it comes to any resistance that I'm feeling or experiencing with them, I will tell them, I'll share with them what I see in them. And then if I can't make the link because of something they've said, I'll make the link because of what I see in them. So if I think you're great, if I see the greatness in you, and I can tell you that I see the greatness in you and why I think you're going to be great, then at that point I could say, but this is the one area that we need to work on that would just blow the doors open so that you can reach your full potential. Let's work on that. Does that help at all?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
You're
for
welcome.
giving this practical strategy.
You're welcome. And we can actually, we can talk offline more about it, because I would love to give you some more strategies in reference to that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to.
Anyone else want to share?
Can I share? Okay. Can I share? Okay. For me, what I took the most is how important it is to question, and not get too attached with what you're adamant with, or not be too sure. Always question and be skeptical, and really look at so many different facts and their credibility. For example, if you base yourself on scientific research, on experiments that are factual, and also on people's experiences, as people who have been closer to the issue than you, who have already solved the problem, learned from successes, from other examples, other experiences. I think that's super important. And this is what being open-minded is really looking at so many different examples and possibilities, and just considering all the different possibilities. For me, this is what really stood out.
That's wonderful, Joanna. So now I'm going to, in our next session, you know what that means, right?
Yes, a lot of questioning.
Yes. Wonderful. Anyone else want to share? Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? Okay. Well, we want to thank you for joining us. Don't drop the line just yet. But we want to thank you for joining us. Don't forget that we do have 2 more works coming up. in our 4-part series. The next workshop is leadership. So go ahead and make sure that you RSVP for our leadership workshop so that we can come back together again and grow together. But I want to just take a quick moment here to thank our team with the Blackstone Launchpad. It is Lauren Dunning, Bailey Johnson, and Acacia Barnett, and of course myself. We are really working diligently and hard to make sure that we're bringing you subject matters that are not only beneficial for you, beneficial for those that you work with, those beneficial for those who you are pouring into. Again, our leadership workshop is on June 4th from 2 to 3. And then we have our creativity workshop on June 25th from 2 to 3 as well. For those of you who do have time, I am available. We can stay on for a little bit and do some group mentoring. If not, if you don't have time today, you can go on to our startup tree, Blackstone Launchpad startup tree, and you can go ahead and book time with me for a one-on-one session. Now, right now, those times are limited, but we will be opening up some more available hours for you. But again, for those of you who do have time, I would love to stay on with you and let's just do a quick group mentoring session where we can kind of chat and discuss what was talked about today and see if we can come up with some new strategies and some additional tips. Is everybody staying on? Oh, wow. Okay. Everybody unmute. Unmute right now. If you're staying on, unmute yourself. If you're in a setting where there's no noise in the background. Unmute yourself so I know you're staying on. Okay, who has a question? Who has a question for me? Or if you have, if you are currently going through something and you want